Get on your knees. The words hit Isabella like a slap. Not the first indignity she'd faced today, but it might be the last. Harrison, the restaurant's owner, smirked. Table 8 needed cleaning. He wanted her to crawl. Humiliation burned, but rent was due and her mom needed chemo. So she did. Crawled. But here's the thing they didn't see, the secret she carried, a fire sparked by years of quiet observation. Harrison thought he was breaking her. He was wrong. Dead wrong. He just lit the fuse. Now Isabella's kindness is about to become a weapon. They have no idea how her quiet courage will change everything. At Mitchell's Fine Dining, the most exclusive restaurant in downtown Chicago, 34-year-old Isabella Martinez adjusted her crisp white apron for what she believed would be just another shift. The morning sun streamed through tall windows, casting golden light across marble floors that cost more than most people's homes. She'd taken this job 3 weeks ago, desperate to support her elderly mother's medical treatments after losing her corporate position. Isabella had once worn thousands of suits to board meetings, but life has a way of humbling even the most successful among us. As she polished wine glasses that gleamed like crystal tears, she had no idea that in less than 24 hours, she'd be sitting across from reporters, holding documents that would bring down one of America's most powerful restaurant empires. Sometimes the quietest people carry the loudest truths. Where are you watching from tonight? The lunch rush at Mitchell's was always intense, but Isabella had found her rhythm among the chaos. She moved gracefully between tables, her warm smile making even the most demanding customers feel welcome. The restaurant attracted Chicago's elite, politicians, celebrities, and business mogul who expected perfection with every meal. Isabella delivered it without complaint, drawing on years of customer service skills she developed in her previous career. Table 12 needs their wine selection, called Janet, the head waitress, who'd become Isabella's only friend in this place. And be careful, that's Mr. Harrison's table, Richard Harrison. Even his name carried weight in the dining room. At 42, he owned 17 upscale restaurants across 3 states, and his cold blue eyes seemed to calculate the worth of everyone around him. Isabella had noticed how the other staff members tensed whenever he appeared, their laughter dying mid-sentence as he swept through like a winter storm. She approached table 12 with confidence, her notepad ready. Good afternoon, Mr. Harrison. I'm Isabella, and I'll be helping you with your wine selection today. Harrison barely glanced up from his phone. His dining companion, a nervous-looking man in an expensive suit, shifted uncomfortably. I didn't order yet, Harrison said flatly, and I specifically requested Michelle for this table. Michelle called in sick today, sir, but I'd be happy to. Did I ask for your life story? Harrison's voice cut through the ambient chatter. Other diners began to notice, their conversations quieting. Get Michelle. I don't care if she's dying. Isabella maintained her composure, though her heart quickened. Sir, I'm fully trained on our wine list. I've been working here for 3 weeks. And 3 weeks? Harrison laughed, a sound like breaking glass. I've been building this empire for 15 years. I don't need some amateur ruining a business lunch worth more than your annual salary. The dining room fell silent. Isabella felt dozens of eyes on her, some sympathetic, others curious. Her cheeks burned, but she kept her voice steady. Of course, Mr. Harrison, let me get the manager. As she turned to leave, Harrison's voice followed her. And next time, don't waste my time with your sob stories. This isn't a charity. In the kitchen, Isabella's hands trembled slightly as she found James, the floor manager. He listened with growing discomfort, his eyes darting toward the dining room where Harrison's laughter had resumed. Look, Isabella, James said quietly. I know it's not fair, but Harrison owns 30% of this restaurant. We can't afford to upset him. Just try to stay out of his way today. Isabella nodded, understanding the unspoken reality of her position. She'd faced difficult customers before, but something about Harrison's casual cruelty felt different, more dangerous. As she watched through the kitchen's porthole window, she saw him gesturing dismissively, while his lunch companion nodded frantically, clearly intimidated. She didn't know that Harrison's bad day was just beginning, or that his next encounter with her would cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Sometimes the most powerful people are the ones with the furthest to fall. The afternoon brought new challenges as Isabella juggled extra tables to cover for Michelle's absence. She moved efficiently through the dining room, her professional smile never wavering despite the earlier incident. Regular customers complimented her service, and she began to feel like she was proving herself worthy of this job she so desperately needed. That fragile confidence shattered at 3:47 p.m. Harrison sat alone at table 8, studying papers spread across the white tablecloth. Isabella approached cautiously, carrying a fresh pot of coffee. "Would you like a refill, Mr. Harrison?" He looked up and something dark flickered in his eyes. "Are you still here?" "Yes, sir. Working until closing tonight." Harrison leaned back in his chair, studying her like a predator, sizing up prey. "You know, I've been thinking about our earlier conversation, about your 3 weeks of experience." Isabella's grip tightened on the coffee pot. "Sir, my grandmother started as a waitress during the Depression. She used to tell me stories about earning respect in this business." His voice carried a nostalgic tone that somehow made her more nervous. She said, "You had to prove yourself worthy of serving important people." Other diners sensed the tension and began watching discreetly. Isabella felt exposed under their collective gaze. "I understand, Mr. Harrison. I'm working hard to, are you?" He gestured to a small puddle of water near his table, residue from the previous guest's ice water that housekeeping had missed. "Because it looks like you can't even keep basic standards clean." Isabella's heart sank. The water wasn't her responsibility, but she knew better than to argue. "I'll clean that right away, sir." "Yes, you will." Harrison's smile was cold as winter rain. "But I want to see if you really understand what service means." He pointed to the floor. "Clean it properly. Get down there and show me you care about this job." The dining room fell completely silent. Isabella felt her cheeks burn with humiliation as she knelt down, pulling a cloth from her apron. The marble floor was cold against her knees and she could feel dozens of eyes watching her every move. But Harrison wasn't finished. "Lower," he commanded, his voice carrying across the silent room. "Crawl like you mean it. Show me this job matters to you." Isabella's hands shook as she lowered herself to her hands and knees. The humiliation was complete. A 34-year-old woman with a master's degree in business, crawling on the floor of a restaurant while Chicago's elite watched in stunned silence. She scrubbed the already clean marble, her dignity crumbling with each passing second. An elderly woman at table 6 stood abruptly, throwing her napkin down in disgust. "This is barbaric," she announced, but Harrison simply smiled and sipped his espresso. When Isabella finally stood, her face burning with shame, Harrison nodded approvingly. "Now that's what I call dedication. Maybe you'll work out after all. If this moment touched your heart, please give the video a thumbs up." As Isabella walked toward the kitchen on unsteady legs, she had no idea that a food blogger at table 14 had recorded everything on her phone, or that Harrison's cruelty had just sealed his own fate. The most powerful man in the room had made his biggest mistake. Isabella barely made it to the employee restroom before the tears came. She locked the door and slid down against the cold tile wall, finally allowing herself to break. The humiliation felt like a physical weight on her chest, making it hard to breathe. How had her life come to this? 6 months ago, she'd been presenting quarterly reports to executives. Now she was crawling on restaurant floors for the entertainment of cruel men. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "How was work today, mija?" Feeling better about the new job, Isabella stared at the message through blurred vision. Her mother didn't know about the mounting medical bills or how desperate their financial situation had become. She'd hidden the truth, not wanting to burden the woman who'd sacrificed everything to raise her alone. The chemotherapy was working, but the costs were crushing them both. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Isabella, it's Janet." Isabella opened the door to find the head waitress holding a steaming cup of tea, her weathered face full of compassion. Janet was 58, a grandmother who'd worked at Mitchell's for 12 years. She'd seen it all. "Come here, honey," Janet said, pulling Isabella into a motherly embrace. "I saw what happened out there. That man is a monster. I need this job, Janet," Isabella whispered. "My mom's treatments. I can't afford to lose another position." Janet's expression hardened. "No job is worth what he did to you. That wasn't discipline. That was pure cruelty." They sat together in the break room, Janet's weathered hands holding Isabella's trembling ones. "I want to tell you something," Janet said quietly. "Harrison thinks he's untouchable because of his money, but I've been watching him for years. He's got skeletons in his closet, and someday they're going to catch up to him." "What do you mean?" Janet glanced around to ensure they were alone. "There are rumors, financial irregularities, health department violations he's covered up, staff members who've disappeared after asking too many questions." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "And I think someone's been gathering evidence." Isabella wiped her eyes. "Who?" "Rachel Morrison from the City Tribune. She's been asking questions about Harrison's business practices. Apparently, she's been working on a story for months." Janet squeezed Isabella's hands. "What happened to you today? It might be exactly what she needs." As if summoned by fate, Janet's phone buzzed with a news alert. She read it quickly, then her eyes widened. "Isabella, look at this." The headline made Isabella's heart skip. "Anonymous source leaks Harrison Restaurant Group financial records. Federal investigation pending." Janet's face broke into the first genuine smile Isabella had seen all day. "Sometimes the universe has a sense of timing, honey. That man thinks he owns this city, but money can't buy you a clean conscience forever." Have you ever faced something like this? Let us know in the comments. As Isabella read the article, she felt something shift inside her chest. The humiliation was still there, but it was being joined by something else, a spark of hope, and maybe something more dangerous. She thought about the blogger who'd been filming at Table 14, about Rachel Morrison's investigation, and about the way Harrison's empire might not be as solid as it appeared. Tomorrow would be a very different day. Isabella arrived at Mitchell's the next morning to find chaos. News vans lined the street, and reporters pressed against police barriers, while photographers snapped pictures of the restaurant's elegant facade. Her phone had been ringing since dawn. The video of her humiliation had gone viral overnight, shared thousands of times with hashtags like Justice for Isabella and the Harrison shame. But that wasn't the only storm brewing. Rachel Morrison from the City Tribune stood on the sidewalk, microphone in hand, delivering a report that would change everything. Federal investigators raided Harrison Restaurant Group's headquarters at 6:00 a.m. this morning, seizing financial records spanning 5 years. Sources confirm this is connected to allegations of tax evasion, money laundering, and systematic labor violations across Harrison's 17-restaurant empire. Isabella pushed through the crowd of reporters, ignoring the cameras that swung toward her. Inside, she found the staff huddled around the television in the break room, watching their world crumble in real time. Janet looked up with tears in her eyes, but they were tears of relief. "The FBI found everything," Janet whispered. "Bank records, payroll fraud, health inspection bribes. That anonymous tip last month started it all, and your video was the final piece they needed." The restaurant's phone hadn't stopped ringing. Customers were canceling reservations. Corporate partners were severing contracts, and 3 of Harrison's major investors had already pulled out. By noon, the restaurant's stock value had dropped 60%. Harrison himself burst through the staff entrance at 1 p.m., his usually perfect appearance disheveled. His eyes were wild as he scanned the room, looking for someone to blame. When his gaze landed on Isabella, she saw a man whose world was collapsing. "You," he snarled, pointing an accusatory finger. "You did this. You called the reporters." Isabella stood straighter than she had in months. "No, Mr. Harrison, you did this to yourself. I made you. Without me, you'd be nothing, just another unemployed nobody crawling for scraps." The irony of his words wasn't lost on anyone present. Janet stepped forward protectively, but Isabella held up a gentle hand. She was no longer the frightened woman from yesterday. "You're right about one thing," Isabella said calmly. "I was crawling yesterday. But you know what? Sometimes you have to hit the ground before you remember how to stand up." Harrison lunged forward, but 2 FBI agents chose that moment to enter the restaurant. "Richard Harrison, you're under arrest for federal tax evasion, money laundering, and violation of labor standards." As they read him his rights, Harrison's eyes met Isabella's one last time. The man who'd forced her to crawl was now being led away in handcuffs, his empire crumbling behind him. The other staff members began to applaud softly at first, then with growing enthusiasm. If you've been enjoying this story, subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales. Later that afternoon, Isabella received a call that would change her life again, but this time for the better. A legal firm representing victims of Harrison's labor violations wanted to hire her as a consultant, helping other workers who'd suffered similar treatment. Her business degree and firsthand experience made her uniquely qualified to help others find justice. Sometimes the lowest moments in our lives become the foundation for our greatest triumphs. 3 months later, Isabella stood in the lobby of Morrison & Associates, the law firm that had hired her to lead their new workers' rights division. The marble floors beneath her feet were just as elegant as those at Mitchell's, but these she walked with her head held high. Her business suits had returned to her wardrobe, but more importantly, her dignity had been restored. The Harrison restaurant group had collapsed completely. Federal investigations revealed a web of corruption spanning 15 years, unpaid overtime, stolen tips, intimidated employees, and millions in tax fraud. Harrison himself received a 7-year prison sentence, and his personal assets were liquidated to compensate the 847 workers who'd been victimized by his practices. Isabella's case had become the centerpiece of a nationwide conversation about workplace, dignity, and the abuse of power. She testified before Congress about labor reform, appeared on news programs, and helped draft legislation protecting service industry workers from humiliation and exploitation. But perhaps her greatest victory was smaller and more personal. Her mother's medical treatments were now fully covered by her new job's excellent insurance. They'd moved to a sunny apartment with a garden where her mother could tend to the roses she'd always loved. On quiet Sunday mornings, they'd sit together drinking coffee, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of hope. "I'm proud of you, mija," her mother had said just last weekend, holding Isabella's hand. "Not because of your success, but because you never let that man break your spirit. You turned your pain into purpose." The restaurant where Isabella had crawled was now a community center purchased by a nonprofit that helped unemployed workers find new careers. Janet worked there part-time, teaching hospitality skills to people starting over, just as Isabella once had to do. They'd kept in touch, their friendship forged in that moment when kindness mattered most. Isabella often thought about that terrible afternoon when she'd knelt on cold marble while cruel men watched. She'd learned that dignity isn't something others can take from you. It's something you choose to keep, even when the world tries to strip it away. Her crawling had become her rising, her humiliation transformed into empowerment for countless others. Last week, she'd received a letter from a young server in Seattle who'd seen her story. The woman had been suffering similar abuse from her manager, but found the courage to report him after watching Isabella's interview. "You showed me that nobody has the right to make us small," the letter read. "Thank you for teaching me to stand up." These letters arrive weekly now from workers across the country who'd found their voices through Isabella's example. Each one reminded her that sometimes our darkest moments become beacons of light for others navigating their own storms. Standing in her office now, Isabella gazed out at the city where her journey had taken such an unexpected turn. She kept a small frame photo on her desk, not of her success, but of that community center that had once been Mitchell's. It reminded her daily that even the most powerful empires built on cruelty will eventually crumble, while kindness and justice have foundations that last forever. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to like, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales. Sometimes the people who try to make us crawl are the ones who end up teaching us how to soar. Thank you for joining Isabella's journey with us today.